They want to do a lot more than educating, and in fact, not even educating. The standards have gone down significantly. Test scores have gone down. They want to do something which is politically grooming the children to be further to the left.
You're watching Restoring America, where we shine a light on the fundamental values of this country and all the reasons they're worth saving. This week, we're going to talk about the one group the left seems to fear the most: parents. I'm Kaylee McGee-White, and this is Restoring America. Parents have been rightly concerned about what's taking place in their children's classrooms for the past few years, and they've started to speak up about it. Viral videos of parents taking the floor at their local school board meetings to express their concerns about inappropriate content being pushed on their students are now common. And so are the left's efforts to silence those parents. Those who dared protest sexually explicit material in their children's classroom or material that's being made available in public school libraries have been smeared as quote-unquote book banners. And those who argued educators should be more focused on basic academic subjects such as math and reading, and less on ideological propaganda about sexuality and transgenderism, have been dismissed as right-wing extremists. The message to parents from those in control of the education establishment is simple: hand over your kids and stop asking questions. That's been the experience of my guest today. But she, like so many other parents, is not willing to give up the right to determine the upbringing of her children. Nor should she be. But before we get to her, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button. And for more, head to washingtonexaminer.com. With me today is Stephanie Lundquist Aurora, a contributor for the Washington Examiner and a mother in Fairfax County. Stephanie, thanks so much for being with us today. You write for us frequently about the battle that parents have, especially in liberal school districts, just to have their voices heard on matters pertaining to their children's education. Why is it such a fight? Why do parents have to fight back against these school officials so much?
Well, thanks for having me here today, Keely. I really appreciate it. I think the main reason that parents are fighting against schools or the educational institution is because our goals are completely different. So parents want their children to go to school and learn the basics: math, history, reading, writing, and particularly after the pandemic when there's been such colossal learning loss during those missed, it was a year and a half in Fairfax County. And so parents just want to send their kids to school and have the educators do the educating. And then the parents in turn would like to do the parenting. And the educational establishment seems to be that the teachers and the administrators and the school board members in liberal districts particularly, and I think emanating nationally from the teachers unions, they want to do a lot more than educating, and in fact, not even educating. The standards have gone down significantly. Test scores have gone down. They want to do something which is politically grooming the children to be further to the left, and also introducing really controversial topics that should be left for parents to decide how children think about things as a family. And so I think it's really hard to collaborate together because our goals are completely separate, and in fact, it's not just separate goals, they're conflicting. Parents want to parent, and they don't want teachers and administrators to try to parent their children.
And one of those points of conflict is the rise of gender ideology instruction and the instruction of sexuality in classrooms for children who are actually quite young. And do the parents in Fairfax County that you're meeting with and speaking with, do they oppose those policies?
Oh, overwhelmingly. They overwhelmingly oppose those policies. And they, sadly, many of them are afraid to speak against them because they don't want to lose their jobs, because a lot of these policies have been internalized in federal government offices, in private sector. And they also don't want to be the targets of public defamation on social media. So, for example, the school bathrooms. I don't know any parents who are for the idea of males coming into females' bathrooms. I don't know any of them. And it's it's just really sad because the pronoun thing too, also parents are objecting. They don't want their children's speech compelled. They don't want co-ed sex education for starting in 5th grade. And these are all policies that have been implemented in Fairfax County schools and in many liberal districts across the nation. And parents are wildly opposed and afraid to speak out about it.
And these are very liberal parents too. It's not like they're right wing.
Right.
And another issue that has affected your sons and your family directly is the one of DEI and critical race theory in the classroom, specifically Thomas Jefferson High School, their decision to change the standards of admission to be less about merit and more about diversity. And what they did essentially was they deliberately stopped admitting Asian students to try and admit students of other colors. Explain that decision, how it affected your sons, and why it's so important that other parents are aware of what's happening.
They're completely, in schools across the country and in higher education, in the workplace, they're completely sacrificing merit for equity. So equity is replacing merit in the sense that the most deserving candidate isn't the one selected, which is, I mean, it's a problem for everybody. It's a problem for our country. In the case of Thomas Jefferson, they changed the admission standards where they completely took out the grade point average requirement. You just have to have above a 3.5. And then anything above a 3.5, the children are looked at the same. So if you have a child with a 3.5, and for example, my son who applied had a 4.2, they're looked at the same in the regard of the GPA because it was above a 3.5. So they took out the admissions exam. So there used to be an admissions exam where all the students had to sit for an exam that was actually engineering based because it's an engineering, Thomas Jefferson is an engineering magnet school. They took away the entrance exam. And instead, they have these essays which have little to nothing to do with education or engineering, and in fact are really ripe for viewpoint discrimination. So they ask the children, give me an example of your leadership. And you can imagine that if one child says that he had a significant role in his church, he was doing leadership work in the church or something, and then there was another child who said, well, I'm a student equity ambassador in my school, depending on the person who's reading it, they'll look more favorably at one than the other. So my son, who is in high school now, applied for TJ, and the other two are too young to have applied yet, but they're all of partly of Asian descent from my husband's side, South Asian, and he was so much more qualified academically than many of his peers who were admitted into the program. He was first waitlisted, and then he was rejected. And he's the kind of kid who Thomas Jefferson used to target, the kind of kid who put together 4,000-piece kind of 3D Lego type sets when he was like 8 years old, and who had a curiosity about always how things worked, and somebody who was just really curious about engineering things. And sadly, he was rejected, and the whole reason was, the basis for the rejection was the administrators and the school board members actually in public meetings said things like, the Asians are the problem. They're doing too well. They're performing too well. So they completely changed the standards of this program so that they could admit people on other things like leadership in their student equity ambassador program. So it's really sad. And what you're seeing, the consequence of this, is that Thomas Jefferson used to be, only a few years ago, ranked #1 in the nation for high schools. And then it dropped, and then it dropped further. So now I think it's 14th. And in fact, the last merit-based class graduated in June, which means that now you're just going to see a drop precipitously because the children who are currently in that program are the ones who they targeted.
Well, and ultimately all of these policies directly affect students, and students are most harmed by these decisions of educators who are at odds with parents. Stephanie, thanks very much for joining to talk about this issue. And for more exclusive interviews, conservative views, and breaking news, be sure to go to washingtonexaminer.com.